Well, for more insight on the Chinese Foreign Minister's press conference, we have Einar Tangen with us, who is Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and the Chairman of Asia Narratives. He joins us from Beijing. It's good to see you, Einar. Let's start with China's strained ties with the United States. The Chinese diplomat addressing these concerns over ties with the U.S., saying that it's fully possible for the two superpowers to become partners. But he warned that Beijing will respond resolutely amid the trade war with Washington. Let's have a listen to this, and then I'd love to hear your comments.
相互尊重是国与国交往的基本准则，也是中美关系的重要前提。任何一个国家都不能幻想一边对华打压遏制，一边又与中国发展良好关系。这种两面人的做法，不仅不利于双边关系的稳定，也无法建立起彼此的互信。
So, Einar, can you give us some examples of what these countermeasures could be?
Well, I mean, they can be economic, obviously, and there was a fairly stern warning that if the U.S. is intent on fighting, China is not going to back down. This is just the way that China has set the tone over this entire two sessions. It's very confident, very calm, very much of a contrast to what's going on, the kind of American soap opera that Donald Trump is presiding over. So, yeah, economics definitely in terms of response to any kind of military move to put missiles, long-range missiles that could reach Beijing into Taiwan, or getting the Taiwanese to declare some sort of independence. Otherwise, it's not really an issue about Taiwan. They're just trying to prevent countries from trying to load on a bandwagon that somehow Taiwan is their concern.
Yeah, that's right. Well, he singled out Japan, from what it seems, on that question. But I want to take you back to the story of China's strained ties with the United States because of tariffs, because of Trump. I believe the journalist's original question was, how differently is the Chinese government going to be engaging the U.S. now compared to Trump's first term in office? What clarity did you hear about this in Mr. Wang's answer?
Well, I mean, 8 years, China has changed. Unfortunately, Donald Trump's tactics have not. He's still shock and awe. He likes to throw out something absolutely, controversial, as I call them, white rabbits and red herrings, to divert people's attention. And then he likes to see what reaction. He looks to the reaction of the market, the financial markets, and then also, how do the people he's threatening react? This is the, kind of move of a playground bully, and then he tries to see if he can make some sort of deal. This is his modus operandi, the way that he has worked in, real estate and all his other business ventures. He just likes to see what will stick. So, in terms of China, they have been prepared. I mean, right now, if you start looking at the numbers, 15 years ago, this is before Donald Trump, trade was about 70%, either directly or indirectly connected to China's GDP. Today, it's 37%. I'm sorry, not 70, 60%. It's 37 today. And of that, U.S. is only 15%. So it would hurt to have a U.S. who is intent on doing these self-destructive tariffs. But in the end, it's not going to hurt China as much as it hurts the U.S. themselves. So China's prepared. They have an open hand policy. They've said, as you pointed out, that they would like to be partners with the U.S. But right now, Washington is convinced that China is the enemy, even as the American people realize that China is not an enemy and they don't eat babies for breakfast.
All right. Well, it's time to listen to just, I guess, another excerpt of what Mr. Wang said, and I'll just preview this for you. He again outlined China's role as a peacemaker amid U.S.-Ukraine tensions. He says that Beijing is willing to play a constructive role in putting relevant parties in the Russian-Ukraine war back to the negotiating table. Let's have a listen.
谈判桌是冲突的终点，也是和平的起点。 我们看到各方立场虽然不尽一致，但是大家都希望达成一个公平、持久、有约束力，并被各当事方所接受的和平协议。这是一个难得可贵的共识，也是应当共同努力的目标。中方愿意根据当事方的意愿，同国际社会一道，为最终化解危机、实现持久和平，来继续发挥我们的建设性的作用。
So, Einar, it seems China's keen for a more substantial peace role as the US seeks a quick deal, believing as well that US and Russia shouldn't alone dictate peace. So how can they do this, Einar?
Well, I mean, the realities are that you can't force peace on another country, and it's only becoming more complex as Europe tries to support Ukraine. Ukraine says they're not going to give in, although recently the letter read by Donald Trump to the joint session of Congress saying that, basically he's thrown in the towel and he'll sign whatever I want him to sign. I don't see that as the basis for a lasting peace, and I don't think any of the parties do. If there is not something where all the parties, and I mean Russia, U.S., Europe, Ukraine, can reach something that is sustainable, it's not going to happen. And what China has been saying all along is that it's always going to end in diplomacy. It's going to be at the negotiating table. All the blood on the battlefield will be wasted. Actually, it'll be negative because no one's going to forget the people who died. And China's saying, look, there was some, not good actions on behalf of Europe, who said, we entered into the Minsk II, peace agreement, knowing full well that we weren't going to honor it. The U.S. In a similar mode. So you have this situation where the existing parties, U.S. and Europe, are not going to be trusted by, especially, now Ukraine. They don't trust the U.S., but also Russia. So the only way to make that happen is to have additional security guarantors. And he went through the list of countries, a lot of them BRICS, but also Turkey, things like this. These are powers, middle powers, who can sit down and be honest brokers. They're not trying to take the mineral wealth of another country. They're simply interested in ending this senseless kind of conflict, which has no end unless there is some sort of agreement at the diplomacy table. So China is willing to participate in that, but it's not dictating any terms. Simply saying, you come to terms and we'll agree to support them.
I'm glad you mentioned BRICS because there was a huge commitment to it in Mr. Wang's session there with journalists. But pertinent to us here in Southeast Asia, the tensions in the South China Sea, how keen does China look on the early conclusion of the code of conduct there, with Mr. Wang's tough words on the Philippines, also on Western media in what he terms a smear campaign on China?
Well, I don't think we can. I don't think that's debatable. I mean, there has been consistent negative press on China, and as far as the Philippines is concerned, they've been acting very aggressively, taking U.S. Missiles, long-range missiles, and putting them on their islands, engaging in these kinds of, confrontations at sea with their patrol boats. The situation has been sitting there in terms of these, these shoals and these disputes for a long period of time. Why is it that under Marcos, it all of a sudden becomes an issue where they want to start ramming into Chinese Coast Guard ships? And the feeling is that, as he said, it's a script written by others. Others, I'm assuming, is the United States, and that this is just to wrap up tensions. Now, remember, if you start looking at the map of China, all right, where is it? Hong Kong, Taiwan, Tibet, Xinjiang, and South China Seas are the perceived weak points of China. These are areas where the U.S. has always believed that they can exert pressure on China and divert it from its economic growth. Now, remember, everything that the U.S. is afraid of with China isn't that it's attacking other nations, because it isn't. It is because economic rise. and that would displace the United States. So, as he pointed out, the Philippines is acting as a pawn against its own interest. I mean, in terms of the press, Reuters did an expose that showed the Pentagon had deliberately launched a disinformation campaign against the Philippines, a close ally, right? They had told them that if you take the Chinese vaccine, you'll turn into an alligator, or that there's some sort of chip in it or something. As a result, you had a higher percentage of deaths in the Philippines because they didn't take the vaccine. And when they were caught, they admitted they had done it, hadn't thought about the cost to the Philippines, and would do it again because it was a good way to get at China. And then 2 days later, all of a sudden, the headlines were all about Philippine patrol boats ramming into Chinese Coast Guard ships. So did the press jump in and say, hey, maybe this is a diversion from it? No, they did not. They just accepted it and moved on to the next white rabbit that was being offered by Washington.
Well, thank you for that little historical excerpt. I want to move on to multilateralism, which, was stressed in many, many factions of Mr. Wang's speech. Particularly, he stressed it in China's relationship with the European Union. I know he gave some trade numbers there, but what signs were there of a possible charm offensive after the recent U.S. ditch of the continent?
Well, I mean, he says he's open to the EU. He quoted all the statistics about trade, about the fact that they've been on the same side many times, that there is an opportunity to do something. But it's up to Europe how they want to react to China. Right now, they're going through a kind of divorce or realization that the U.S. under Donald Trump, remember, he's only here 2 to 4 years, is not going to be pleasant, that he doesn't share their values or their approach to the world, that he's an unrepentant, builder of empires. He wants to expand it. He wants to take lands of everywhere from the Middle East, South America, Greenland, Canada. I mean, and Canada is, scratching their head, because when Europeans look at Canada and they see how, they know how close it is, and not just physically, but in terms of, of all these years, they scratch their head. If he's willing to treat Canada this way, we're not as close. And obviously, he doesn't feel any kind of sense that he's allied to them. He sees them as a problem. He's identified them as a group that's, going to be subject to 25% tariffs, and that they have, quote, been ripping off America, and that they only got together to cheat America. I mean, these are tough dialogue pieces. And obviously, Europe has to come to terms with them. China is open. They've extended visa-free access to China unilaterally. It hasn't been returned in many cases. And they're just simply saying, we're open. We want to build. We believe in a multilateral world, and the U.S. doesn't. But one thing I think you should pay attention to is that throughout this entire dialogue, there's an increased emphasis on regionalism. And I think that's an implicit understanding that although everyone wants to support the UN, with the U.S. sitting on the Security Council, able to veto anything it doesn't like, the UN has become less and less effective, and that these regional bodies, whether it's in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, or the stands, that they have to come together and deal with each other in a way that they think is going to be sustainable.
Yeah, and to add to, I guess, regionalism was his focus on neighborliness and, of course, the importance of stability in the Middle East. Okay, thank you so much, Einar. We got through that together. Thank you for listening through this speech with me, Einar Tangen, who's Senior Fellow at the Taihe Institute and Chairman of Asia Narratives. It's good to see you. Thank you.